Good evening friends, this session is about test taking, mock tests. All these questions that you keep asking, how many mock tests are to be taken, when do I start taking mock tests, how do I analyze my performance, how do I know if I'm improving, all those things. You have so many questions about mock tests. So what I've done is that I'll not give you one word answers or one sentence answer to these questions. I'll explain the process in detail very briefly, but yes, I'll try and make you understand the process, and then you will know these answers yourself. So these are the questions. When should I start taking mock tests? Second, how many mock tests should I take? And the third and the most important one, how to analyze and improve my performance through mock tests. Now these two answers would be different for different people. I'll explain the process, and this would be common. The third one would be common, right? So what I'll do is that I'll just kind of briefly try and explain to you how this works, how this whole thing works. So you have to be patient. I'll just take 10-15 minutes and I'll explain this process, and I can assure you that you will understand how this whole thing works. So let's get started. I'll try to answer the first two questions first through a single slide. Just look at this. I'll talk about the process to prepare for this exam, right? What is the first thing that you expect to do? Concepts, learn the concepts, basics, fundamentals, and practice questions based on it. This is the first step. What happens after that? You have to ideally take timed sectional tests. What are timed sectional tests? Timed test means small tests which are sectional. So not that full length 1 hour test, but 20-minute tests. So 20-minute test of English, quant, reasoning, like that. So these are timed sectional tests. Timed is the key word here. It's not about solving those 30-35 questions. No, it's about solving those 35 questions in 20 minutes. So that's the second step. And the third one would be full length mock tests. What are full length mock tests? Full length mock tests are the ones that we call mock tests. 60-minute tests, 3 sections. I'm talking specifically about prelims for now. I'll go to the mains at a later stage, right? So 60-minute test would be a full length mock test. So what are the steps here? Concepts, practice, first step. You learn times participants, you learn RC, you learn critical reasoning, all those things. Fine, you get everything now. You go to the timed sectional test, 20-minute test, and the third one would be the full length mock test. So this is the total process through which you should prepare. It should not be that you jump to mock test straight away or like that. That is the ideal way to prepare. Now all of you would be at different stages in this preparation. So many of you are already prepared with everything. You are on to mock tests currently, which is fine, which is okay, but some of you might have started later, fine, at a later stage, and you are still not done with the concepts and all, not done with the bulk of the syllabus. So mock tests are not for you at the moment. You might start taking it, but not for you at the moment, right? So that way it differs. So what are those 2-3 things through which you decide when do you start taking mock tests? One would be the level of completion of your syllabus, whether you've done the stuff, fine, practiced enough questions, the way I have discussed in the strategy sessions on quant and reasoning. And 2 would be the number of days left for the exam. So you have to look at both the things and then take a call. So right now we do not have a concrete date. I think IBPS is in the first week of December, so still some time away. There is still some time left, and SBI PO I think would happen earlier. So you do not have much time. So you are not left with much time to start taking the mock test. So for those people who are prepared, who think they have done the concepts and syllabus and all, they can get started with the mock tests. I'll tell you about which ones. Those who are still left with something, try and finish it up quickly, a quick revision, a quick go through the concepts and all those things, and then come to the mock test. But the answer to the first question is that you cannot afford to delay it for long now. No, it's high time you have to start taking the mock test. So that's the answer to the first question. When do I start taking the mock test? If you're targeting this SBI PO and IBPS PO, it is high time you have to start taking the mock test. Even if a syllabus is not completely complete, when you've done like 60, 70, 80% of syllabus, you're good to go. You have to start doing that. As I said, that's the optimal flow. You start from concepts and practice, and then you go to timed sectional tests, and then you go to full length mock tests. One way can be, for those people who start very late and are struggling, you can jump from here to here, from concepts and practice to full length mock tests, and then on the basis of your requirement you can go here in between, right? I'll explain what I'm saying here. For example, your syllabus and everything is done and you take a full length mock test. You realize that you're scoring well in quant and reasoning, but when it comes to English you're struggling. How do you know how you're struggling? I'm going to talk about it, but with your scores, right? Your percentile score. So quant reasoning, you're crossing 85, 90, 95, whatever. When English, you are stuck at 60. You take another mock test, full length, and you realize that that's a pattern that's happening. What does that mean? You go to the timed test of English, sectional mock test of English, not the total one, but sectional mock test of English. So this process would then be assuming that quant and reasoning here, they are all right. Fine, English is a problem. So I go to timed sectional tests of English. That's the reason I said it'll be different for different people. So somebody else might have a problem in quant, they'll go back to the quant sectional test. After spending some time with it, now don't ask me the number because the time is very limited. So if you think you take 5 timed tests of the section in which you have a problem, आपने 5 टेस्ट दिए quant के जिसमें issue था, and you believe that your scores are improving because you could analyze certain things. In place of a 1-hour test, you're just taking a 20-minute test, so you could focus more on it, and your scores seem to be improving. You can again come back to the full-length mock test. So these timed sectional tests are very important to work on the section in which you think you have a problem. There is a deficiency because of which you can get stuck, because of which you might might not be able to clear the exam because the sectional cutoff you might not be able to clear. You get the point. So that is the use of timed sectional tests. Otherwise आप इनको छोड़ सकते हो, but I would not suggest that. So people who started preparing very early, this has to be the way. Concepts and practice, timed sectional tests, and then you go to the full length mock tests. Now it must be clear, how do you start with the mock tests? When your syllabus is almost complete and you think you are in a position to test yourself. Without doing that, it might be very tough for you. Now the next question is, how many mock tests? I told you about sectional tests. Sectional tests, the utility is to just iron out the chinks in that section in which you think you're weak. That is the utility of sectional mock tests. So people who think they are like relatively good in all the 3 sections can skip sectional mock tests because the time is very little right now. When it comes to full length mock tests for prelims, it'll be very different for mains. We'll talk about it later. For prelims, should take at least 15-20 mock tests, at least. Now, at least does not mean that this 15-20 is an optimal number. Somebody might take 50, 70. I do not mind that because it's just a 1-hour test. Depends on your requirements. Now, how do you decide that? I'll say 15-20 is a must for everyone, and test series is not a very expensive product. You can get 2, you can get 3, that's all okay, right? You have to decide on the basis of your performance in the test series. So if you think, and also on the basis of the time left for you, because you have to work on other things as well. In fact, even something like GK, they'll be important for mains, but you'll still have to keep working on it. So on your, if you can somehow put a couple of mock tests daily in your schedule because you're working full time on your preparation, it's good. If you're prepared, concepts वगैरह सब हो गए. If you think it's just one that you can take daily, that is also good. If there is somebody who thinks that itna bhi time nahi hai, that you just cannot take 1 test daily, even an alternate day would be fine, but that's not ideal. I would say for prelims, 1 mock test daily is an ideal dose. If you tell me एक number बताओ अब क्या अच्छा number है, 1 mock test daily for 15, 20 days, 30 days at a stretch should be good. ये number की बात हो गई. Now some people have been taking mock tests for 1 month already or 2 months already. ये मत सोचना आपका काम खत्म हो गया. Mock tests right before the exam would be very important. So for example, let's assume that SBI PO prelims happens on say 25th of November. ऐसी आर्बिट कोई भी डेट ले लिया, 1 महीना है आपके पास. So in this 1 month, 1 mock test daily would be important. Even for people who have been taking mock tests for like 2-3 months already. You get the point, because इस last phase को ठीक से utilize करना है. So that answers your second question about कितने देने हैं tests. और ये सबके लिए अलग अलग होता है. You would come to know when you are improving, or when your performance is to that level that you think you can actually crack the test, when you think you have got the conviction that you will be able to crack the test. Now let's come to the most important question, how to utilize the mock test. And this is the part where I think a lot of people actually struggle. करना क्या है, कैसे देने हैं, क्या करना है, and how do you know कैसे उसमें improve करना है, how do I do better in the next one. So let's talk about that now. I'm talking about the analysis now, evaluation of your performance in the mock test, how to use them. Let's say you take a mock test and you score X in it. So this is what I scored in the test, right? All of you know what that is. So if you take a test and you get a 50 out of 100, fine. So that's your score. There's another parameter, what I want to score, fine. And what generally happens, or what happens with a lot of people, is that there's a huge gap, isn't it? It looks like this. So all of you can understand this feeling. So you get a 50, you want to get a 75, you want to get a 65, whatever, find some number. But there is this gap, and that's true for even the best of students. जो सबसे बढ़िया prepared students होते हैं, उनके case में भी there is this gap. This is always there, and this would always be there. almost in case of all the students, right? What I scored, fine. What you get in the test, fine. And what you want to get in the test. कितना भी हो सकता है, so it can be up 30 marks, it can be up 10 marks, whatever, but that gap is always there, and that gap keeps troubling you. Fine. So I'll just change this picture slightly. Fine. Please pay attention here. This is very important. I'll not look at it like that. So I'll not look at it like that. Let's remove this. I'll put another box here. What I should have scored. Now let me just explain this to you first. क्या मतलब है? So there's another parameter here. One is what I scored in the test. I'm talking about one mock test. Just take any one mock test, and for the sake of understanding, let's assume that you get 50 marks in it. What you want to get is 75. You think 75 would have been a wonderful score in this test. मजा आ जाता, ये मुझे चाहिए था. Fine. And that 25 marks deficit troubles you. So what I'm doing is that I'm introducing another box in between. That is what I should have scored. मेरा कितना आ जाना चाहिए था. आ जाना चाहिए था तो मतलब क्या था? ऐसा तो 100 आ जाना चाहिए था. You could have got 100. No. आ जाना चाहिए था means this is very important that you understand this. Should have scored means based on my current knowledge, my skills in English, quant, reasoning, मेरा इतना आना चाहिए था. I know this much. I should have got a 65. चलो 75 नहीं आता जो मैं लाना चाहता हूँ. I want to get a 75. 75 मुश्किल लग रहा है. 65 तो आना चाहिए था. नहीं होता. So there is another box in between that at times we tend to ignore, and we look at that huge gap between 50 and 75 and say ये 25 marks कैसे बढ़ेगा? And आपको लगता है कुछ फायदा नहीं हो रहा है. It's not working, right? So I'll just show that to you. So what happens is that when you want to jump from this part, what you scored from what you want to score, should look at this as well. What I should have scored, what you should have scored. It is like that. I mean, if you look at this, it is like this, right? So you want to, or you have to go from what you scored to what you should have scored. जो आपका आ जाना चाहिए था, जितना आपको आता है उस हिसाब से. What you should have scored basis your knowledge of the subject. And I'll call this as gap 1. Fine. Let's extend this, and this part here, this gap, what you should have scored and what you want to score, this gap, I'll call this gap 2. Now this understanding has to be spot on. This is very important, guys. Please listen to this very carefully. What generally happens is that we do not realize the difference between gap 1 and gap 2, and this is very important. I'll just take 2 minutes. I'll explain this. This gap 1, this part here, is primarily about test taking skills. Fine. What are test taking skills? Your ability to convert your subject knowledge into marks. This gap 1 is about your test taking skills, which is about your ability to convert your knowledge into marks at the time of the test. This is gap 1. And this gap 2 is about your subject knowledge. You get the point? So generally, when there is a gap, we will use that example of 50 and 75. When there is a gap of 25 marks, a part of the gap is because you could not convert your knowledge into marks. A part of the gap is because your subject knowledge is deficient, right? So there are two problems. The problem is that when you want to solve this, you'll have to break it at a granular level and try and understand what's happening with me. So you now onwards would start thinking like that. Whenever you analyze a mock test, I'll tell you the process in detail. Fine. You always would think like that. जब मेरे नंबर नहीं आ रहे हैं वो गैप 1 की वजह से कि 2 की वजह से. Now in this gap 1 को change करना is easier, much easier. I am talking about this gap here, gap 1. Gap because of your test taking skills, or because of your poor test taking skills rather. How do you change that? This is simple. What I'm talking about is just not improving your subject knowledge here. That is important. That is about gap 2. Just honing your test taking skills. Just being a better test taker. What does that mean? How do you do this? How do you go about this? You look back at a test, a sectional test, a full length test, whatever. When you ask yourself what was possible, what I could have scored with my existing subject knowledge. Subject का knowledge नहीं बढ़ाना है, सिर्फ जो मुझे आता था, what I knew, could I apply all that and did I get the optimal score that I could have gotten the test? The answer for almost everybody would be no. किसी का नहीं आता उतना जितना आ सकता था. हमेशा we miss out on certain things. We'll get stuck in some tough questions. We'll do some silly errors and all those things. But the idea is to reduce that gap, ideally to 0. You get the point? The box 1, what I got and what I could have got, जो मेरा आया और जो मेरा आ सकता था, उसके बीच में ideal gap should be 0. And this should work for most of the people. By work, what do I mean? You will not be the all India top by that, but by work means that you will clear the exam. For most people, I am talking about those people who have been studying seriously since a long time and उन्होंने मेहनत की हुई है. आ जाएगा, इतने से ही काम हो जाएगा, बट आप उस पर काम नहीं करते. Many people, I know many students who would take a test, fine, मेहनत करेंगे, सब करेंगे, they end up getting say a 50, again let's stick to that 50, and they end up getting disappointed. No, I should have got a few more. They don't look back at the test, fine. So you need to look back at the test and decide a number for yourself. This is what I could have got. Now you would not compare yourself with a friend, fine. Let's say we are talking about quant, you get a 20 out of 35, your friend got a 33 out of 35, and you are in awe. आपको लगता है कितना बढ़िया स्कोर आया, how do you get a 33? I want to get a 33, इसका आया, मेरा भी आ सकता. So this is that third box, what you want to get, that's your wish, fine. उसके पहले सिर्फ एक ये वाला स्टेप लेना है. देखो एक बार, just look at this test very objectively and decide for yourself what you could have got. You will find a DI set which you did not touch, which was very simple. कर सकते थे, आपने कहीं पर और टाइम खराब कर दिया, fine. You made a silly error in a couple of questions, छोड़ सकते थे. You decide eventually that you could have got a 27. 33 तो नहीं आता, 27 आ सकता था. पहले 27 नहीं लेकर आना चाहिए, सोचो. And you are troubled about how do I get a 33? How do I jump from 20 to 33? Get to that 27. That 27 or 26 or 28, whatever, that number would do the job most of the times for most people. आप समझ रहे हैं? हम उसको ज़्यादा लोड ले लेते हैं उस चीज़ की ना. How do I cover this up? No, cover that gap one first. Ideally, try and make it 0. It'll be very difficult. It'll always be tending to 0. 0 की तरफ जा रहा होगा, बस वही आपको करना है. तो what is the process? How do I check or how do I know if I'm improving? If your gap is reducing, if your gap 1 is reducing with each passing test, it means that you are improving as a test taker. You get the point? So, for example, in the first mock test, I'm not talking about absolute scores here. Gap 1 for you in the first mock test that you take is say 20 marks. आपको लगता है मेरे 20 नंबर और आ सकते थे. When in one of the mock tests, you take the next one. What is the idea? The idea is to learn from your mistakes. You got stuck somewhere, जहाँ नहीं करना चाहिए था. You made a couple of silly mistakes, जो नहीं करनी चाहिए थी. You missed out on an easy question, जो नहीं करना चाहिए था. Fine. You fix all that. Fine. And you learn from your mistakes. You work on it consciously. In the next test, if that gap reduces from 20 to 15, for me, you are improving. Not ideal, but you are improving. So the idea is to reduce that gap. Keep reducing that gap and bring it to a level where you'll say, ठीक है यार, दिस इज ह्यूमन, दिस इज एक्सेप्टेबल. ये इतना तो हो जाता है सबसे, 2-4 नंबर का ऐसा इधर उधर हो गया. नॉट आइडियल बट एक्सेप्टेबल. बट राइट नाउ फॉर मेनी ऑफ यू दिस गैप वुड बी ह्यूज. करके देखिए आप एक्सरसाइज. दिस इज वेरी इंपॉर्टेंट. स्पेंड सम टाइम ऑन इट एंड देन डू इट रेगुलरली फॉर एवरी टेस्ट. यू विल नो what is my learning from this test and what do I need to improve in the next one, and you will keep improving. Trust me, you will keep improving. This gap 1 is much easier to reduce as compared to gap 2. Now what is gap 2? Gap 2 is, this is a little tricky. This is about subject knowledge. As I already said, आपको अपना subject थोड़ा सा improve करना होगा इसके लिए. Look, I understand that ideally to reduce gap 2, again gap 2 should be 0, gap 1, gap 2 both should be 0 for an ideal performance. आप topper बन जाओगे exam के. Fine. But to improve gap 2, to reduce that gap 2, you need to be, you need to have more time in hand. Fine. You have to give more time to the subjects and all. And this is very little time left now for the exam. But even now you can work on gap 2. How do you do that? For example, छोटा सा example देता हूँ. For example, you believe that most of your friends or batchmates जहाँ पढ़ रहे हो, जहाँ पर भी हो, when generally tend to do quadratic equation 5 questions in 1.5 minutes. Just an example, or 2 minutes, whatever. And you tend to struggle in those questions. And you think that you either take 4-5 minutes or you just cannot do them, or you get 1 or 2 incorrect. It means that there is this problem here that you can settle. बहुत ज़्यादा चीज़ें नहीं कर पाओगे अभी क्योंकि टाइम कम है, but there are small things that you can settle. This question type, this particular question type, quadratic or whatever, is something that's scoring for most people. I am not getting marks here. I think this can be fixed quickly. What do we do? 300 questions of quadratic equation practice, the way I discussed in the quant strategy session. एकदम फर्क दिखाई देगा उसके अंदर. It can be true for DI, it can be true for coding, decoding, whatever. Fine. So identify small areas where you think you can improve. So how does your overall performance improve at this stage? I'm talking specifically about the stage when the exam is just month and a half away. How do you improve? Gap 1 कम से कम करना है, उस डिफरेंस को 0 के पास लेकर जाना है. Gap 2, identify specific areas in your subjects where you think you can get a few more marks. So if you work on say something like your reading skills, you might not be able to change that drastically at this point, but छोटे छोटे areas हो सकते हैं ना जहाँ पर you believe that yeah, this is scoring for most people, this is not scoring for me, I can probably fix it. एक वो feeling नहीं आती that I don't feel comfortable here, but अगर ये आता होता तो मैं इसको जल्दी कर देता, उसको कर सकते हो. You get the point. So you'll need to decide for yourself, and that's the reason why I'm saying I'm not prescribing things like that कि अब कोडिंग डिकोडिंग इनपुट आउटपुट कर लो, इससे एकदम नंबर इंप्रूव हो जाएंगे, नहीं, सबके लिए अलग अलग होगा. तो डिसाइड फॉर योर सेल्फ व्हाट आर दोज एरियाज थ्रू विच आई कैन रिड्यूस माई गैप टू. नो, ऐसा नहीं होता. गैप टू पता कैसे चलेगा? दैट यू आर लुकिंग एट द टेस्ट. प्रीलिम्स में ज़्यादा होगा भी नहीं, मेंस में दिस वुड बी वेरी इंपॉर्टेंट, बाद में बात करेंगे, फाइन. बट इन प्रीलिम्स ऑल्सो यू विल रियलाइज दैट आई जस्ट कैन नॉट डू इट क्विकली, मेनी पीपल डू इट. सो दिस इज गैप टू कंसर्न, राइट? वर्क ऑन इट. ऐसा कुछ और भी हो सकता है. सो यू माइट नॉट बी एबल टू वर्क ऑन अ लॉट ऑफ एरियाज हियर, but you can certainly identify certain areas through which you can reduce your gap 2. बस काम हो जाएगा. So gap 1 सबने करना है. Gap 2 specific people who believe that they still have deficiencies in specific subject areas, उनको पकड़ के रगड़ दो एक बार ठीक से, फर्क पड़ जाएगा, एकदम पड़ जाएगा. You believe that जैसे सीरीज है, मान लो आपको लगता है सीरीज के क्वेश्चन आ जाते हैं, and at times they are 5 questions there, and I struggle in 3 of them. Not good. There are people who do series questions in 1 minute, 5 questions, 1 minute flat. Why? Because they have done 1000 series questions. So probably it's time to pick up 2 random PDFs from internet of series and just do everything from there. 1-2 दिन से ज़्यादा नहीं लगेंगे उसके अंदर. आपको लगेगा एकदम से this one area where I used to get 1 mark, 2 marks, I'm getting 5 marks in 2 days. You know, in 2 minutes. So like that you can work on it. क्या करना है, कौन सा एरिया है, you need to identify because you are a different individual from your friend. Right? समझ गया बात को? तो gap 1 और gap 2 के combination को reduce करके you reduce your overall gap, and that would be sufficient for most people, not for everybody, but that should be sufficient for most people. Most good students, most students who have put in all those hours struggle because of gap 1. I can tell you that. gap 1 ही मेजर गैप होता है. gap 2 बहुत कम लोगों के साथ होता है. वो किन के साथ होता है? जिन्होंने पढ़ाई ठीक से नहीं किया. गैप 1 ही आपको जनरली बॉदर करता है. दोनों के कॉम्बिनेशन को कम करो, योर परफॉर्मेंस इन द मॉक टेस्ट एंड इन द इवेंचुअल टेस्ट, इन द फाइनल टेस्ट डेफिनेटली इंप्रूव. What did I explain in a nutshell? Gap 1, this is to be fixed by everybody. Fine. So this should not exist. This should tend to 0. And ideally, what you score is the score that you should have scored. जो आपका आना चाहिए था वही आपका आए. ज़्यादातर लोगों का काम इसी से हो जाएगा. Gap 2, for those people who think they are weak at subjects. So pick specific areas that you think can be fixed quickly, work on them, practice some questions, and then this would reduce. This becoming 0 would be tougher, fine, at this stage. But this is in any case not the problem for so many students. Fine, it is gap 1. So इसको तो काम करना ही करना है. This coupled with some parts of gap 2 should do the job for most people. इसको समझो इस चार्ट को and उस पर काम करो. ऐसा नहीं है, again that same thing. One size fits all, वो काम नहीं करता सबके लिए. प्रॉब्लम को आइडेंटिफाई करो, फिर उसके ऊपर काम करो, पक्का ठीक होगा. When you have headache, you take paracetamol. Fine. When you have stomach ache, you take something else. When you have diarrhea, you take something else. एक दवाई नहीं काम करती ना. So when you are trying to fix these things, try and identify what exactly the problem is. You are your own doctor. Fine. हम लोग सिर्फ broad guidelines दे सकते हैं. You find out what the problem is and then you work towards it. So when I get questions like, sir, I'm doing this and I'm taking 2 mocks daily, still my scores are not improving, I don't know if the person is doing the right things or not. You need to identify the requirement. आपको क्या करने की ज़रूरत है. Whether you need to work on a subjects, whether you need to work on a test taking skills. I have seen wonderful students, very good, fine, know almost everything, can solve almost everything, struggling in tests. Isn't it a common problem? Sir, number नहीं आते, सब कुछ आता है. No. Probably your problem is gap 1. Fine. Now you know what exactly the problem is. Work on it consciously. It would start improving. Do not expect some kind of magic happening in 2 days. No, but it will definitely happen in the next 10 days. If you work on it, take a test, identify what the problem is, gap 1 or gap 2, work towards whatever the problem is. If it's gap 1, can be fixed quickly. When you sit for the next test, have those things in your mind consciously about what caused that in test 1. क्या problem हुआ था, मेरे को कैसे कम करना है. Work on it. थोड़ा बहुत होगा, थोड़ा नहीं होगा. You'll be able to fix some parts, not some other parts. Go to another one, the 3rd test, the 4th test, the 5th test. What I'm saying is, if the gap is 20 currently, you cannot make it 0 suddenly. Fine. So from 20, probably it'll become a 15, then a 10, then an 8, 7. A gap of 4-5 marks for a test like this is very good. Most people generally have gap of 20-30 marks. You come out of the examination hall, most of the times they, अरे यार बहुत आसान था, मुझसे नहीं हुआ, अरे I did that mistake, oh I got that puzzle incorrect. I'm talking about these things, and trust me guys, for most these people, most of you, this gap 1 is the only problem. आपको आता है सब्जेक्ट यार, इतने दिन से पढ़ रहे हो, how do you not know the subjects? वो तो फिर अलग लोग हैं. Some parts of gap 2 along with gap 1 should fix this for you. Trust me, it'll fix it. एक और चीज़ आप मेरे से पक्का पूछोगे, you do not get sectional toss in most of these test series. या पुराने होते हैं या अपडेट नहीं होते. बहुत simple solution है यार, get another test series. So if you've got a knowledge board, get a practice mock as well. यू विल नॉट टेक सो मेनी टेस्ट, एक और खरीद लो, कोई भी और ले लो, फाइन. वॉट यू कैन डू इज, एक 60 मिनट्स का टेस्ट है, उसको ओपन करके जस्ट टेक वन सेक्शन ऑफ इट. टाइम क्रूशियल है ना हमारे लिए, तो हम ये सब नहीं करेंगे. सो इफ यू थिंक दैट मॉक टेस्ट्स आर अपडेटेड, सेक्शनल मॉक टेस्ट्स आर नॉट दैट गुड और नॉट अपडेटेड रेगुलरली, बड़े वाले मॉक टेस्ट को ही खोल के 3 सेक्शंस में डिवाइड कर लो. दैट बिकम्स अ सेक्शनल टेस्ट. यू मैनेजर्स, यू गोइंग टू बी मैनेजर्स, नो, यू कैन मैनेज दीज सिंपल थिंग्स. लोग ऐसी चीज़ें पूछते हैं, इसके लिए मैं आपको बता रहा हूँ, बट कर सकते हो. जस्ट फाइंड अ वे. भगवान ने बुद्धि दी है ना, व्हाट इज दैट फॉर? इट्स नॉट जस्ट टू अप्लाई इन द एग्जामिनेशन ऑल वाइल सॉल्विंग दोज पजल्स. नो, वो तो है ही है. कॉमन सेंस, वी ऑलवेज थिंक अबाउट इट. रियल लाइफ प्रॉब्लम्स, दैट्स व्हाट यू विल बी रिक्वायर्ड टू डू वंस यू बिकम अ मैनेजर. ये तो चैलेंज अभी लाइफ में शुरू हो रहे हैं ना, ये तो आसान वाला चैलेंज है. हो जाएगा क्लियर, मेहनत करो ठीक से. इट्स वेरी लिटिल टाइम लेफ्ट गाइज एंड शुड ट्राई एंड मेक द मोस्ट ऑफ इट. लुक एट इट एज 6000 प्लस वैकेंसीज. पीओ के एग्जाम्स होने वाले हैं. इट्स 6000 प्लस वैकेंसीज. दे माइट इम्प्रूव एज वेल. 1-2 बैंक्स ने रिपोर्ट नहीं किया जिनसे एक्सपेक्टेड है. बहुत बड़ी अपॉर्चुनिटी है. जस्ट 2.5 months, 3 months, 3 महीने की मेहनत एंड द लाइफ कैन चेंज. डोंट लेट योर सेल्फ फॉरगेट इट. यू ओ इट टू योर सेल्फ. यार कब तक मेहनत करते रहो, कब तक ऐसे घिसते रहोगे यार. लाइफ में कुछ और बड़ा करो, कुछ बड़ा सोचो. बैंक के एग्जाम्स कब तक घसीटते रहेंगे. आई डू नॉट वांट टू कैरी इट फॉरवर्ड टू नेक्स्ट ईयर. सीटी होगा, ये होगा, वो होगा. नहीं, ख़त्म करना है, ख़त्म करना है, ख़त्म करेंगे इसी बार. एंड उसके लिए जो मैंने आपको बुलाया पहले भी, एक टाइम टेबल बनाओ. देखो क्या एक्टिविटीज़ हैं दैट आर नॉट एडिंग टूवर्ड्स योर प्रिपरेशन. व्हाट आर दोज थिंग्स दैट आर नॉट मेकिंग मी रीच SBI PO. क्या क्या है, सब काट दो, सब खत्म कर दो. फॉर 2-3 months आई एम नॉट अवेलेबल फॉर एनी बडी, फॉर माई फ्रेंड्स, फॉर नोबडी. कुछ है ही नहीं लाइफ में, एक ही चीज़ है. 3 महीने, इट्स नॉट अ बैड डील यार. 3 months वर्सेज वॉट 40-50 years ऑफ लाइफ. थिंक अबाउट दैट. 3 महीने का सैक्रिफाइस, नॉट वर्थ डूइंग. है डेफिनेटली. विल कीप डूइंग दीज सेशंस यार, करते रहेंगे हम लोग. जो भी आपको प्रॉब्लम होगी बताओ, कमेंट में बताओ, एंड ट्राई एंड डू वॉट एवर पॉसिबल फॉर यू. बट वर्क हार्ड, मेहनत करो, सब बढ़िया होगा. ऑल द बेस्ट.